Hello and welcome to the Too Much Apparently podcast. If you're new here, this is a podcast for the deeply feeling, overthinking, emotionally overloaded humans who've been told they're too much apparently. And if you're back, thanks for choosing to sit with us again.
We're Alice and Carly, two therapists who are also just sensitive weirdos trying to make sense of life, healing, and our own brains. This isn't a professional advice podcast. It's more like the messy, honest conversations that happen when you finally feel safe enough to say what you're really thinking.
This space is for people like us, the ones who've been called too sensitive, too serious, too emotional, too intense, and have spent way too long believing that it's true.
Okay, on with the episode. Today we're talking about anger, rage, the stuff we've been told is too much, too scary, too dramatic, too inappropriate, especially when you've grown up being praised for being the good girl.
We've already covered being too nice to say no and too good at pretending to be fine. But what happens when all that niceness and pretending boils over into, actually, I'm not fine, I'm furious?
This episode is about what happens when the mask of I'm fine slips, and what's really underneath is anger, and why that's not always a bad thing. So I don't know about you, Alice, but I'm going to struggle with this episode.
So I feel more comfortable with this episode.
I feel like that's going to be interesting in how the conversation plays out in talking about what it means and how we feel about being angry.
Mm-hmm. Well, why don't you start with what it is that makes you feel like you're going to struggle with this episode?
I feel like I'm going to struggle to know how to engage in the conversation with you or answer questions around it, because anger has always been a really big issue for me. It's obviously there's many emotions I've suppressed over the years, but anger is like the top key. Oh, we don't like that emotion that has been squashed and squashed. Yeah, so I have a tricky relationship with anger, and I feel like that's going to make it not hard to talk about, as in difficult to talk about. Just, what do I have to say about anger when it's an emotion that I've just squashed.
Yeah, okay. How does it work for you in terms of so where my mind has gone to is, what about animal cruelty?
Oh yeah, don't get me started on that.
So when it's anger in terms of animal cruelty, you can access it quite easily.
Yes, so the one place that I can access the anger that you have very cleverly brought out just then, the one place I can access anger is when it comes to harm and injustice. So that's when I can tap into that anger and feel that anger, and sometimes use that anger for things as well, where if I'm ever going to use my voice in a way that's quite, what's the word I'm looking for?
Forceful? Direct? Powerful?
Yeah, those kinds of words. Just really sure of myself and able to really speak my mind is when it comes to anything related to injustice or cruelty and suffering of humans, and especially animals. Sorry, but animals just seem to beat humans in my suffering, emotional responses to suffering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I feel like for me, I've mentioned several times now on the podcast that I do have this part of me that is, the word that keeps coming up is feisty, and I just don't like that word for it.
Is that because it just doesn't seem to fit?
Because I think when I think of feisty, where my mind goes to is like early 2000s young women in the public eye, and like, oh, she's feisty, isn't she? Like, I think said in a negative way, but actually I feel like this is an important and powerful energy that I can use for good. I haven't always, and it's been really painful for me, but really important for me to realize the ways that in the past, how I've responded with anger in a destructive way.
Okay, yeah.
And I think because that's what I'd seen modeled to me, that almost like it becomes a battle, and like, who's going to win. Whereas now I see anger as about, how can we both win, or how can we all win here? How can we find something that is going to work for all of us? So the way that I explain anger to my clients now is that it is the emotion that motivates you to set and hold boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so important, because without that, if you're not connecting to that anger, it's really difficult to set and hold those boundaries. And also that there's a massive spectrum of anger, and that often when I talk to people and they don't like it, what they're actually talking about is probably more up at rage kind of end.
Yeah, or aggression.
Yeah, aggression. Yeah. And really seeing it as a destructive force rather than something that can be constructive.
Yes, well, anger, it has a bad reputation.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And that's not to say that I feel comfortable with it all of the time, because there are still situations where I'm like, oh, whether that's me being angry and saying something or being on the receiving end of somebody else's anger. But I feel like I'm a lot more comfortable with it now than I ever have been in the past, where I definitely saw it as something to get rid of. I
Mm,
shouldn't be angry, that other people shouldn't be angry.
yeah, I think that comes up a lot for people.
Mhm.
And certainly for me, especially in the past, that it's not okay to be angry. Like, you shouldn't be angry. You should try to calm that down.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
And
not a good thing.
yeah, yeah, which touches straight back to the kind of messaging that we've talked to across various episodes previously, really thinking about that kind of good girl conditioning and what's that? Um, Girls are sugar and spice and all things nice.
As well, talking about the word anger and thinking of the word anger as anger's kind of like the zoomed out emotion. So if we think about the core emotions that we as humans experience, and anger is a word that encompasses lots of other emotions that are going to sit under anger. So I think it's important to say when we're talking about anger, we're talking about anger in all its forms. So whether that's being annoyed, being frustrated, being peed off, being disappointed, even, can come under being angry. And then, of course, there is aggression and fury.
Mhm.
I'm sure there's more. Need to pull out the emotion wheel.
Yeah, I see them as quite distinct in my mind, but I agree, you're right. And if we shrink the core emotions down to it, I think is there seven, six or seven? Rage does fit under anger, but in my mind, they are really distinct things. And I think that feels really important for how comfortable I can be with anger, that I'm not comfortable really with. Hmm, actually, I don't. Maybe I am. Maybe something's changed. And I'm only just realizing as I'm talking about it in this moment.
What was you about to say before you changed?
I was going to say I'm not comfortable with rage, but actually, I think because I'm more comfortable with anger, I am more comfortable around rage, because I can see it for what it is. That rage is often, if not always, linked to something historical, not what's going on in that actual moment.
Mm-hmm. And like so many things, there's healthy and unhealthy versions of these things. If I think of somebody at a protest,
Hmm.
you said animal cruelty, so I'm just going to go back to animal cruelty
Yeah.
protest. If I think
Hmm.
of people there expressing rage through their, and I don't know if rage is the right word, but a very big display of anger about things
Hmm.
and channeling that through really powerful words and mantras and speeches and things like that, but in a way that's, you can see the anger. I can experience that as a healthy expression of someone really standing up for what they believe in
Hmm.
versus rage that to me would be frightening.
Yeah. Yeah. And even there, so when my mind went is, oh, what's the difference between rage and outrage?
Oh, yeah.
Because what I would see the person at the protest, and given the current political climate, I think it's going to depend on which protest it is.
Yes, one's
Um,
healthy, one is very, very not healthy.
but if I think about someone at, say, an animal cruelty protest, I would see them as outraged.
Yeah, okay.
I would
Yeah.
see if I'm picturing somebody at a protest in a rage, I what I see is this kind of loss of control,
Yeah.
is screaming, shouting, not in a chanting like we will be heard kind of shout, but like yeah, a loss of control, fury, it feels really hard to pick out because I feel like you can have healthy fury as well. I just think for me, it comes back to, is it constructive or destructive?
Yes. Destructive was the word that was coming up then when you were talking about rage. And I was thinking, oh, okay, so does that mean rage is destructive? But yeah, constructive or destructive. And I feel like there are very obvious examples of what's constructive and destructive.
Mhm.
And I think there'll be less obvious examples of what's
Yeah.
constructive or destructive. I mean, how many people engage in angry fueled behaviors that would think that they were being constructive and maybe not seeing the way in which that's harming them?
Mhm. I think with politics in general and lots of kind of political issues, that people can be rightly angry, but if they act then in a certain way, that can be destructive for their cause. But
Mm-hmm.
also that it's not as straightforward as that. You know, if we go right back to, say, the suffragettes, they did a lot of destructive things, but my opinion is that needed to happen to get the change that we needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a really difficult conversation to have.
So, knowing that our relationship and experiences with anger is different, tell me a little bit about your relationship with anger and what comes up for you and how do you know when you're angry?
Yeah. Part of the reason that I started therapy is because people were telling me that I was being too much in different ways. And I think part of that is that I was angry about things and it was impacting my relationships in a negative way. Whether that was because I would be openly angry or because I was angry in a hurt way and was then upset. I suppose how I'd say it now is that I didn't know how to handle anger. That I had all of the feeling, I hadn't suppressed it in in the way that you perhaps have. It was there and kind of bubbling, but I didn't know how to channel it in a healthy way.
Mm.
And that then would lead to a lot of shame for me
Mm-hmm.
because I would have had some kind of outburst, whether it was anger or whether it was coming out as tears, that it would reinforce this idea that I was too much and that I was hurting people.
Mm.
And I can own now that I absolutely have hurt people, you know, that I saw arguments as something to win. And,
Yeah.
I'm a fast thinker, I'm good at arguing. And yeah, that I would, yeah, that I absolutely did hurt people in the past. I think the way I perhaps would have thought about it back then was to make a point or
Mm-hmm.
to prove that I was right or, kind of all different things like that. My relationship with anger now is very different. That I see it as essential for my well-being. I see it as essential for healthy relationships. I see it as something that if I can respond to it while it's small, then that's the best time to do it, even if it feels a bit like I'm making a fuss about nothing. That if I try and pretend to be okay with it or tell myself that I should be okay with it, that it is just going to sit and fester. It's just going to sit and fester and get worse. And I'm going to have to deal with it at some point down the line.
Mm. Can I just ask you a question?
Mhm.
When you were talking about the anger that you would experience and saying that at times you felt like it would hurt people and sometimes it would come out as outbursts, crying, other times being in arguments and wanting to win and those kinds of things. When you were talking about the outbursts and the crying and the feeling a bit much, and we might be talking about the same thing, but do you put that down to anger or do you put that down to like emotional dysregulation and having big feelings and the way in which then that felt unmanageable and would come out?
I suppose I think both. I
Mm.
think both. Definitely a big part of it was that, I mean, the concept of emotional regulation when I was younger was just not a thing. Like that, it just wasn't. Um, I
Just trying to think
can't.
about the difference between anger and
Yeah.
distress. You know,
Well.
if you think about a toddler, people see that as an angry outburst, but it's
Mhm,
a form of distress and
mhm,
your body being totally flooded with the emotion and not being able to cope because of course at that age we definitely don't have the tools to
mhm,
even really know what's going on with our reactions. And if you fast
mhm.
forward that to the now or to an early life, Yeah, I'm just as you're talking, the word that keeps coming into my mind is sort of that real flood of emotion and distress, and I'm trying to think about, is that anger? That's not me telling you about your experience, just a thought that's coming up
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think they can be closely linked. I'm just so coming back to the image of a toddler, and it feels like there's a question there about, is it anger or is it distress? It can be both.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
That it can be both. I would say anger is the emotion that comes up when our boundary is violated in some way. So, a big realization for me with anger has been around overwhelm. I think I would like ask myself, like, why am I so irritated all the time? Why am I snapping? Why am I shouting? And now I think a lot of it has been realizing that I'm autistic,
Mhm.
then starting to look at sensory triggers and also things from my own childhood. So I feel like the question you're asking me is it anger or is it distress? I don't think we can separate them. That if I'm looking at a toddler and I'm thinking they're distressed, it could be because they're angry.
Yeah.
And so another way that I think about anger is that it's when we want the other person or the situation to change, that it's a request for change. Maybe that's the first difficulty then with sort of unpacking what even is anger. What are we
Yeah.
counting anger and what are we not counting as anger?
Because there's also so many sayings around anger. So there's things such as anger is a secondary emotion. There's always an emotion that comes first. And then there is also the saying that anger is internalized depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard that saying before. There's probably more, but there are so many different ideas about what anger even is, and yeah, how anger then relates to those other emotions like distress, like overwhelm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. But I suppose if I was to just to boil it down, I see it as quite a protective emotion
Yeah, I would agree with
that
that.
that it only starts to go wrong when we struggle to deal with it in its simplest form, if you
Hmm.
like. So it's not anger that's the problem, it's how we respond to anger that can become the problem.
It's the difference between the emotion and then the behavior.
Yes. Yeah. And I see this a lot on parenting accounts, but, kind of hold it for myself as well that any feeling is okay, but some behaviors are not. That
Yeah,
just because you're feeling even rageful, that doesn't mean you can just go around and act on it. So, and I think that's important perhaps for people to hear because I think it can be a scary emotion for people to either feel in themselves or to be on the receiving end of. And again, if we sort of bring in childhood and how that impacts us, and the impact of our parents, if we just kind of shrink it to that for a moment. If you're a little child and your parent is angry, whether that's at you or just around you, that's terrifying.
it is. It's really scary.
Yeah. So it really makes sense that people would be so afraid of anger and want to dismiss it. But I think it's really important to start to separate out what do we mean by anger and what's helpful for us and what isn't helpful for
Hmm.
us. I don't think it's possible to have a healthy relationship without anger in it.
I think that's true. I think that will be true of any emotion that we may feel or ignore or suppress,
Mhm.
that a healthy relationship also has to involve the full spectrum of emotion and being able to communicate and share that emotion, ideally in the healthiest and most constructive way possible.
Yeah. It makes me think about I don't know if it was as late as when I was doing my couples training, maybe it was before that, but about if couples don't argue, that's not a good sign.
Yes, I
I,
say this all the time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think sometimes we can, yeah, perhaps before we've done this work, maybe there is that. Is it almost idealized of, not arguing?
it is
Um,
for sure. People wear it like a badge of honor, like, oh, we never
yeah,
argue.
we
Oh, we
never
haven't
argue.
argued
Yeah,
in 30 years of marriage. And it's like, hmm,
yeah. What's going
oh,
on there?
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. When I said before about learning to hold that anger within the relationship in a constructive and appropriate way, I think it's also about recognizing as human beings there are, of course, going to be time when we don't handle it where we don't handle it great and maybe our behavior wasn't great. And of course, that's going to happen. And I would just say then it's about being able to own that and recognize that and seek to repair or apologize when that happens, because we're of course not going to deal with our emotions in the best way all of the time.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you're touching on something really important there, which is about repair. That I don't know if this is too therapy language, but ruptures are inevitable. So disagreements, fallings out, ruptures are inevitable in relationships. So repair is really important, and I think that's even more so when it comes to anger.
Yeah,
That
definitely. Because I know you described anger as about boundary violation, and I always think of anger as your body saying, I'm not okay with this.
yeah.
And even if sometimes that feels a bit over the top or a bit out of proportion, maybe sometimes it is, but if that's the feeling that you've had, it's your body signaling that you don't like this, you're uncomfortable with this. And sometimes anger is you standing up for yourself and having a voice and being able to set the boundary of, I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
And so it's important to be able to voice that in our relationships so that then we can ultimately have that repair. And going forward, that is going to make things a lot better when each other knows where we stand and where our boundaries are and what we're willing and able to deal with and what we're ultimately not prepared to have within the relationship.
Yeah. And I think with those, when you say about those, like those little things, and I think it can be so easy to be like, oh, I shouldn't be angry about this. This is silly. But my experience is that if you're feeling angry about something and it feels like it doesn't make sense, it's probably because there's something really important that like held in that. I'm just trying to scrabble around in my brain for examples.
Oh, I've got one came to me straight
Something.
away.
Oh yeah, go on then.
So I get angry if my partner's home late and it wasn't his fault.
Mm.
There's just been bad traffic, but
Mm-hmm.
he's home later than he said he would be. I get angry about that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's a great example of one that doesn't seem proportionate and also doesn't seem fair.
Yeah.
And I
Okay.
know that.
Mm-hmm.
And I still get angry.
Mm-hmm.
So again, what do we do then in those situations? Because we could tell ourselves, I shouldn't feel angry.
Mm-hmm.
And so put that to the side or put that down, try to get rid of it
Mm-hmm.
because it feels not fair. It doesn't feel proportionate. But I guarantee you, when it happens again, the anger will still resurface because it's being resurfaced for a reason, whether or not that's fair or proportionate. So is it
Mm-hmm.
fair that I get angry at my partner for something that's not in his control? No,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I still don't like it and it still bothers me. For some reason, probably due to my neurotype, I hold a lot of stock in people following through what they say. So if someone says, I'll be home at 6:30, then
Mm-hmm.
I expect them to be home at 6:30.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's
What
not
does it mean if
reasonable.
then? What does it mean if they're not? So not from the logical part of your mind, but from the emotional part. What does it mean if he's not home on time?
There's something about not feeling important,
Yeah.
which feels so big to say for that
Mm-hmm.
scenario, but I think that's what it comes back and taps into.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm not important, that I'm not being prioritized.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there's also more to it than that as well.
But even if we just take that bit, so like you started off with, oh, I'm feeling really angry and I know it's not reasonable to feel angry about this thing that, the traffic was bad. He had no control about it. But the way I see it is it's not that is the trigger, but the thing that really wants addressing is I don't feel important.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can step outside of the shame of I'm feeling angry about this tiny thing and be curious, we can get to what's going on underneath.
Exactly. And the way in which you ask me those questions, to boil down to it, is sometimes things that people can try to do for themselves, because then you realize that so many times the things that we have reactions about are from the past,
Yeah.
from things that we're carrying from the past. And so it's not actually about the being late. It is about what that connects to in the past and the way in which that story of, for example, say for me, of not feeling important carries through. And so anything that could potentially connect to you suddenly not feeling important is going to trigger a response. And that is why these things can feel like they're out of proportion,
Yeah.
but they're often coming from somewhere. And when we can address that, we can then be a bit more compassionate and kind to ourselves about this is the real reason that I'm angry. And then we could share that. So saying to my partner, if I seem a bit off with you when you get back, I need you to know I know it's not your fault. And I'm not really angry at you. It's
Mhm.
just how it makes me feel. And I can't
Right.
help how it
Yeah.
makes me feel. So at least then, when he comes home, if I'm a bit like, because of him being late, he can just be like, it's okay. And I know what this is about. And actually,
Mm.
it quickly dissolves and we crack on with things.
Yes. Yeah. That's a really good point, actually. I had a big realization with this a few months ago where I was angry about something. And the pattern in this relationship was that I would be met with defensiveness or dismissal or justification or, whatever else. And we've been having a big discussion, and this person decided to try meeting me with validation, and the anger just dissolved in my body. It was the strangest feeling. It was the strangest feeling. And actually, I went back to therapy the next week, and I said, I think I'm going to have to like review my identity as an angry person. I don't think I am an angry person. That actually, if I'm met with validation, the anger disappears.
There's so
Purpose.
many things.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. So many examples of that now are just popping into my head. But
Mm.
another one that really stands out to me, and this is one of the things that makes my partner feel like a safe person relationally, is there was a day that I was feeling incredibly overwhelmed. I don't recall why at all. I was doing myself some lunch and I was spooning pasta out of the oven dish into a bowl. And as I was doing it, I was trying to be careful to not spill any. I was just doing like the last one piece of pasta plopped off onto the kitchen side. Literally not remotely an issue, right? But
Mm-hmm.
suddenly I just broke down in tears that I had spilled this one piece of pasta and now had to clean it up. Would have taken like 2 seconds, but it was such a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, when that happened, my partner just said, it's okay.
Mm.
It's okay. You can cry about that. Come here. Gave me a hug,
Mm.
said it's all right. You're really overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Just ultimately validated that response.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many past examples that I have in different relationships or with other people. And I know many other people probably say this as well, where a common response to something like that would be, oh, don't be so silly, or it's not a big deal. It's just a piece of pasta. Like, look, I'll get it up. It takes 1 second. Like, what are you getting so hot and bothered about? And it makes such a big difference to just be met by someone saying, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as you say, then the feeling that then you have just dissolves.
Right. Yeah. Because the need has been met. The need for being heard or understood or mattering, it's been met and it dissolves.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about what happens when we do allow ourselves to express our anger or express a big emotion. But what about how many times over the years, or particularly in the past, where we've been led by this be nice script, to not show those displays of anger? And it's, of course, important to say, especially in girls and women, anger is not something that's particularly tolerated by society. So a big emotional display from a man could be deemed as passionate, whereas a woman, it's deemed as angry, unstable, crazy, on a period, all of those kinds of
Mhm.
things. So anger is not acceptable, especially in women. And your relationship with anger is different to mine, but do you have a sense of where you first learnt that being angry wasn't allowed?
I think just the constant response that I got every time that I was angry. So, what I'm holding in my mind as I'm thinking about this is one is that my behavior was not okay, that I didn't receive the emotional education that I needed. That sounds like a very formal way to say it. I didn't receive. Well, I do think about it as educational because I do think about it as a skill. I think emotional regulation is a skill. So I didn't receive the emotional education that I needed when I was younger to be able to manage my angry feelings in a healthy way. So there's that. But I also think about relationship dynamics. And I think because I would call out problems with people that did not want to be held accountable, I would be positioned as the problem. So my
Mhm.
anger would be positioned as the problem. So that message of, if you just stopped being angry, it would be okay.
So you were displaying your emotions, displaying your sense of anger, but then you were being told essentially that's not okay, or you're being a troublemaker, those kinds
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be honest, I don't think I would have been heard even if I had been able to manage my emotions in a healthy way. And well, I know that because I've learned to manage my emotions over time and have revisited these issues with these same people in healthy ways and have still been met with dismissive responses that continue to position me as the problem.
Hmm.
So I know that that's more about the dynamic than it is about me. But obviously, when I was acting in destructive ways or trying to win an argument rather than trying to find a mutually agreeable resolution. But also, I do have relationships now where that is different. So I think about my relationship with my husband, and we are much better able to navigate each other's anger. And we've really worked on that a lot, being curious with each other and being compassionate with each other and really trying to get to what is it that's going on underneath that means that you're angry about this thing.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I think my relationship with anger, as said previously, has come from the good girl
Mm.
side of things. I don't think I just was an angry child anyway.
As in, like, you didn't even really feel it as a child. You can't remember feeling angry.
No, I can't really remember feeling angry as a child. And I think it's an emotion that I maybe didn't experience that much. So growing up, I've had that good girl label, like I spoke to earlier. I know I was always described as the good one in the sense that I wasn't a particularly emotionally dysregulated child. So I don't think that I really had many displays of anger. Of course, there would have been some, but I don't think it was something that I expressed or felt often. And like many people, I grew up in a home where parents didn't always get on, ultimately ended up getting divorced. And so if you grow up in a home where there's lots of arguments, then of course it can mean you're around anger quite a lot. And, for anyone else who has parents that sometimes can go from 0 to 60, then I think I viewed anger quite negatively and like something that I did not want to be around.
Mm.
I do find anger scary, particularly when it starts to head a bit more towards very externalized, sometimes aggressive seeming actions. I also know that sometimes things aren't aggressive, but I interpret them as aggressive and my nervous system doesn't like it. And I also don't like it from the sensory aspect. I don't like loud voices. I definitely don't like shouting. I think it dysregulates my nervous system because I don't like things at that volume. And sometimes I feel like, it's not necessary. We can resolve it. You can be angry without shouting. And I don't know that always very realistic, but that's just how I've always felt about it. Like I think I've said, there's no need. There's no need to start shouting and getting angry. So over the years, I feel like I didn't like anger for a lot of reasons. And I didn't then like it myself. Thinking about it now, perhaps one of the reasons that I then struggled with anger myself is because if I would never naturally deal with it like that, I've then not been shown how to deal with it in a different way. So I'm angry. I don't like it. I don't like that. So I'm not going to do it like that. But then I don't know what to do with it. So actually, I just don't like it. And I'm going to suppress it down and down it goes. And also, I think growing up as a very sensitive person, later in life realizing that I'm also neurodivergent, there were lots of other things going on that also led to me silencing my voice, not sharing my opinions, making me smaller, and all of those don't really fit with these displays of anger and standing up for yourself and setting your boundary and saying that's not okay. I would never do those things because I would be trying to people please. I would want people to like me. I wouldn't want people to reject me. So if you've done something that bothers me, I'm not about to go and tell you. I'm just going to keep that in and keep it to myself and not talk to you about it. And that connects to what you were saying earlier about rupture and repair. I would say one of the biggest things I've struggled with and that I'm still working on as a skill is repair after rupture, because it's just not something that I've had much experience of. And getting into therapy, of course, when you're doing your training and
Mm.
people are talking about ruptures with your client, which are inevitable. As you said earlier, all relationships will experience ruptures, and that is also true with therapist and client. And I remember sitting in lectures and talking about rupture and talking about it like rupture can be a good thing. It can create really rich things to then bring in and talk about in therapy and can lead to really great things. I was sitting there like, wait, what? No, I want my clients to love me at all times and like me and think all of these nice things and to not ever be upset or annoyed or angry. How could that possibly be a good thing? And I remember thinking like, oh gosh, this is going to be something I'm really going to have to work on if I want to be a good therapist. Then I'm going to have to get really comfortable with ruptures, even embrace ruptures, which I still don't embrace ruptures. I'm just going to be honest about that. But I'm much better at dealing with them now and of working through the repair. But I think most people who decide to become therapists will find there's something that's a real sticking point for them that they really need to work on and work on in themselves in order to be a good therapist. And that one is mine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it makes me think about a session I had with my supervisor a few months ago now, where I had the realization that uncomfortable conversations are uncomfortable. And I think this, ruptures are uncomfortable. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's quite unusual I feel like there are situations where somebody has been angry with me or has expressed anger at me that I felt okay with in the moment. I have definitely had that experience, but a lot of the time it is uncomfortable. But I think the way that I get comfortable with that is that, so in the moment, when I'm sat in front of a client and they're angry, what's probably in my head is be curious, be curious, be curious, kind of on a loop.
Okay.
It's almost is to sidestep the energy of what's being expressed so that it doesn't go in and hit all my sore spots. To
So
sidestep the
sorry, I know I'm interrupting you there, but it's so funny that you just said that because as you were talking, my mind, and I was listening, but my mind was also imagining a scenario. I was thinking about what would happen tomorrow when Alice comes around for a takeaway. If she was to say something to me like, I just need to talk to you about something, Carly, because something that happened yesterday on the podcast, it actually really upset me, or I feel really hurt about something that you did, and I just want to talk to you about it. And I was imagining that scenario in my head. And it's literally like you said, I know I will absorb that instantly. And I can almost feel the way my heart would drop. My heart rate would pick up. I would start sweating. And it's like a panicky response, like sitting on edge, waiting for you to say what it is and hear your displeasure with me. And it instantly just creates such a strong reaction in my body.
Yeah. So I think, so if it was me and you, I think I would actually have a similar response
Oh,
because
okay.
I see, so in therapy, I see it as part of my work is to draw out this is a bit technical and jargony, but part of it is about not drawing out, I'm not doing it on purpose, but is allowing the transference. So allowing people's past, the messages about themselves, about others, the world to come out. So if they're angry with me, part of that is going to be about their perspective. So in order for me to understand, like I was saying, I'm going to go to be curious, be curious, be curious, and really see if I can get at what's going on. Not to say that it's not about me, because it may well be something that I have literally done, not just about their past. So I see it as, so when clients do it, I see it as great. They feel safe enough, and this is going to take us deeper somehow.
Mm-hmm.
I think with you, because I don't feel like we have had any moments, and maybe this is something for us to be curious about when we're saying that ruptures come up in all relationships. I don't know. I can't think of any moments where we've said to each other like, "Oh, I didn't like this," or "I didn't,"
No,
anything like that. Um,
no, we never argue.
we never
We're such good friends that we never argue.
maybe some of that is about proximity, that we don't spend tons of time together, so there hasn't been that opportunity to, and also that we have got a lot of shared values, so we're not going to kind of disagree on those points. But well, I suppose I do also hold that at some point it will happen. At some point it will happen, and yeah, if it was the other way around, Well, I had that a bit at the end of when we were recording the last episode. I felt like my head was all over the place, and what I was sat with is, oh, she's going to think I'm no good at this, and and imagining you as feeling angry about it, and if you did, that would be uncomfortable. Of course, it's going to be uncomfortable, but I think part of how I manage the difficulty of those conversations is knowing that as uncomfortable as it is, it will take us to a better place. So, as
Yeah.
much as I don't want you to be angry with me, if you were angry with me and you were able to express it, I can at least take away from that you felt safe enough to express it to me
Mm-hmm.
and that we would understand each other better.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's a positive thing. But yeah, I don't have a goal to feel comfortable with it anymore since that realization in supervision. I don't have that as a goal anymore to feel comfortable with it. It's more that I've just accepted that sometimes I will feel uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that I'm doing something wrong.
No, definitely not. And what you were saying before, it made me think if we do swallow our anger, if we do not say to someone that they've hurt, annoyed, or upset us, then we are depriving ourselves of perhaps being able to make that relationship even richer by really understanding one another. And you're also denying the other person the opportunity to recognize that they might not even know. And so you're then also denying the other person the opportunity. They're going to carry on through life not knowing this thing. You're going to remember, you're going to know. Potentially resentments could build. And
Yeah.
whereas, yeah, you're depriving that person of the opportunity of knowing that they have bothered you and to be able to then do something about that. That kind of is making me think about what does happen when we swallow our anger. And I've certainly can come up with many examples, but because you've spoken a bit more about being a bit more open and outward with your anger, do you also have experiences of times when you have swallowed it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And have made myself quite unwell with it, actually. You kind of touched on before about depression as suppressed anger. And also, when you were saying before about you value peace and quiet, like I value peace and quiet too. I'm such a peace and quiet kind of person. But if I am feeling angry about something and I'm not talking about it, I don't have any peace and quiet because it's just rattling around my brain, and feeling like, why would they do this? And didn't they think about me? Didn't they think about how this would impact me? Yeah, I can kind of touch on that, not feeling important, like you were saying before. I can touch on that in me. So actually expressing some of this stuff is how I get to that peace and quiet. There are lots of times that I have suppressed things, and like you, I think they tend to be times where I'm telling myself I shouldn't feel this way. This is it's too small of a thing, or it's too selfish of a thing, or it's too entitled of a thing, or whatever. But every single time I have unpacked it, it's linked to something really tender underneath.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know for swallowing anger for me was almost second nature for so long and is something that I now actively have to try to not do. And it's something that sometimes I'd say where I'm at now with it is that I will express it a lot more than I would before. Now I'm trying to find the balance between when something has bothered you enough that it is worth talking about, and when something has bothered you enough and it's actually probably just worth letting go. And I feel like that at the moment is what I'm trying to figure out because I've spent so long not speaking up, not saying what I need to say, not sharing my opinion. I now want to be able to do those things and feel like I'm being more of my authentic self in those spaces. But then it's also hard to know when is it worth it and when is it actually just not worth it. But I'd say what has happened for me with swallowing anger is again, I think that has turned into anxiety. I think that's turned into depression and self criticism, affecting my confidence, affecting my levels of self esteem. Because all of these times, if there has been some kind of whether there's been a boundary violation that's made you angry, whether it's the way in which someone's behaved towards you that you don't think is right or fair, if you're upset about how someone has treated you, or if they've been thoughtless or not thought about you, all of those things, if you then never say that over and over and over again, I think that is almost telling yourself, which is interesting because I'm just realized this is going to loop back to what I said at the start. You're telling yourself you're not important.
Hmm. Yeah.
And around we go.
Yeah. Hmm.
Connecting to what I said earlier. So actually, if I've held messages that I'm not important
Yeah.
throughout my life that then get triggered in the moments like the being late, and then I've reinforced the message myself by telling myself I'm not important because then I'm not sharing these things.
Yeah.
Of course, that is going to impact your mental health and well being in a way that over years, I mean, this is why I'm still unpacking it. That's then going to take a long time to undo and unpack
Yeah.
because of the constant people pleasing, the constant putting other people's emotions above yours, trying to avoid rejection, trying to avoid people falling out with you and not wanting to be around you anymore. So, yeah, I think the impact, what I'm trying to say, can be great.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what what you got to there and what you touched on is so important that often, I don't want to say always, but I think quite often there is that message about not mattering and that we really need to watch out for how we're reinforcing that in
Mm,
ourselves. That is
yes.
really important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were saying something before about seeing other people being angry, and that's not how you want to express anger. And I think it would be helpful for us to separate out what anger is and what anger isn't.
Mm,
For me, I see anger as the emotion in your body, not anything else. It's not the behavior. It's just the initial emotion that comes up in your body. That emotion is okay. Like all other emotions. All emotions are welcome.
yeah, I would say anger shows up in my body almost like a heat and
Yeah.
a kind of pressure in my chest. Not like
Yeah.
not like a crushing or a squashing pressure, just like something that's building
Hmm.
inside my chest. And of course, I experience the tension. It definitely goes to my jaw as well. And if you hold on to that, of course, tense jaw, you can get a lot of jaw ache and things like that.
Hmm.
If I was to think about the way in which anger initially appears, for some reason, I'm picturing it a bit like a sun or a star that's forming inside my chest. So it's bright and it's hot and it's fiery and it's expanding, like the star is expanding and growing in there.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good way to put it. It's definitely hot for me too. I tend to feel it in my upper arms,
Oh,
which I don't know if that is common or not, but that's
mhm.
definitely something that I notice. I think there's an urgency to it for
Yes.
me. Is
Mm,
there's an urgency to it? Yeah, but I suppose if we start to talk about what it's not, I think some of this kind of goes back to what we were saying before is that, it's not destructive. So when I think about anger, I'm going back again to what you were saying about the difference between anger and distress.
mhm.
Let's say this is very stereotypical, so bear with me. But if I picture an angry man punching somebody, I don't just see anger. I see something has gone wrong with the response to the anger, the initial emotion. And it's really important to separate those things out. So, same with arguing, that you don't have to say anything in an angry way, that actually it's better not to, if you can.
It's so funny that you say that because my partner says he would rather that I shout because when I say I'm angry, he says I do so in such a cool, calm, and collected way that I'm just
Mhm.
like, I'm actually really angry right now.
Mm.
That he says freaks him out more. And you wish I'd just go, I'm really angry right now. And that's
Right.
always like really surprises me because I'm like, surely I'm doing it the right way rather than just losing it and like being loud and expressive. But he says there's something much more chilling when I just go, I'm actually really angry right now.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that speaks to, different people need different things. But okay. I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I want to always change what I want to say there because there is obviously something for him that that doesn't work for him. I want.
No, I think he's just weird. It's fine.
I don't think he is. I don't think he is. I suppose to go back to what I was saying is that you don't have to do anything in an angry way. I think that can be quite frightening if you've been around people's rate, uncontrolled rage that has been destructive, of course you're not going to want to be like that. And I think it can be quite scary to hear that actually if you want to have healthy relationships, you're going to have to articulate your anger if what you've had modeled to you is that uncontrolled destructive rage and feeling like, oh, is that how I've got to do it? You don't have to do it like that. Actually, you can say it in a warm way. You can say, I really need to talk to you about this thing. When you did X, I felt Y, and this is why it matters to me, and this is what I would like going forward. That it doesn't have to be that's not to say the other person's going to be like, oh right, yes, okay, well that's that feels fine. It's probably still going to feel horrible, maybe even for both of you. But it can be done in a warm, caring way, and it feels really important to me. Sharing your anger with someone can be a really good way of showing that you care about the relationship. Certainly, it's that way for me.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
I don't care about the relationship, I am not going to put in the effort and the energy to raise an issue with you. I will just withdraw.
Yeah.
So if I'm angry with you and expressing it, it's because I care about you and I care about our relationship and I want it to be better for both of us.
Absolutely,
Um,
yeah. That made me think about is what happens when you start off a bit more cool and collected and you're trying to articulate, as you said, your anger. And of course, we're all humans. Sometimes things can start to build up and can start to get a bit heated. And then I think it's then how you deal with that if things do start to get a bit more heated and start to lead a bit more into arguing. And people are going to have different needs. But I personally fundamentally disagree with never go to bed on an argument. I think you can 100% go to bed on an argument. In fact, sometimes that is the right thing to do because after you've had a good night's sleep, when we're in our REM sleep, that's when our brain starts to process events and things from the day, and that will include said argument. And so sometimes when we wake up on the other side, we might wake up and hold a different perspective, or the energy that that thing had might have diminished, and we might be able to come back to it in a different way. Or even if we are still feeling similarly, it's going to be much better and you're going to have a much more constructive conversation returning to it after you've had some processing time and a good night's sleep. And I think the same can be true when they say never walk away from an argument. I think sometimes you need to go to your corners, have a time out, have a breather, collect your thoughts, and then come back together. And I don't think sticking with an argument to try and get it resolved is always the right thing to do. And I know some people recognize that they need that space and might try to walk away. And I know other people can get really quite anxious and want to get the argument resolved as quick as possible because the idea of not resolving it can feel really painful. Then we can end up chasing the person and almost, come on, quick, resolve this with me, resolve this with me. And we're stepping a bit into attachment styles, which we don't have time to go into. But I think it is trying to decide as a couple when things do start to get a bit heated and we start to get into the realms of we're not going to be able to hear what each other is saying now because things have got too worked up. What are you then going to do and how are you going to recognize when you've reached that moment? And then what will you do about it?
Yeah. So one of the things that I would add on to what you're saying there, because I completely agree, going to sleep on an argument can be fine. Walking away from an argument can be fine. As somebody with abandonment issues that works with a lot of people with abandonment issues, it's really important to set a time limit to agree and come back, even if it's that you agree to come back and then you request more time apart.
Yeah.
People with an avoidant process can unconsciously, maybe consciously, but I think often unconsciously use that as a way to avoid further conflict.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose of the gap has to be, or the purpose of the pause has to be to regroup and come back, not to try and kick the issue down the road.
Yeah.
But if you're somebody that needs to take space, that actually, if you're able to communicate to, say, your more anxiously attached partner, I need 10 minutes or I need an hour, or can we come back to this at this time? That's going to be far less scary for that person than if you just go, I can't deal with this anymore, I'm going for a walk.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's in the way in which you do it and how you return to it and come back. Setting a time limit on it or an agreed time when we're going to come back to discuss it, I can see why that would be really helpful.
So you've said that this is something that you're like still actively working on, which it is for me too, but it sounds like it's kind of fresher for you. What would you say to somebody who is starting to get to grips with their anger?
Firstly, I think when you can recognize that you need a better relationship with anger and that acknowledging that for however many years you've not allowed yourself to experience anger, because it's not just about expressing it to someone, it's also allowing yourself to feel angry in the first place. So if you are someone who suppresses, puts it to the side, can you start to allow yourself to feel the anger, even if you're not yet at the stage where you feel like you can start to express that to other people and to sit with it? That can, of course, be really uncomfortable, or we can really not like it, can even feel frightening. It doesn't always have to be this huge, big thing. Some people might talk about if you feel your anger, go and punch a pillow, for example, or whilst in the car, like scream at the top of your lungs. There are these big ways within which you can start to remove that tension out of your body in those bigger ways. But to actually connect with your anger and feel it, I think even things like journaling, even just being able to write down, I feel really angry and I feel really angry because. And so it doesn't have to be this big outward display. It can just be an acknowledgement of, I am angry, naming it. I am angry because I wish I could do this or say this to this person. This is what I would say. I don't feel able to do that right now, but then at least you've been able to voice it and say what it is that's bothered you and say how you wish you would be able to address this in the future, as just a way just to start to get a little bit more comfortable with, allowing yourself to say that it's there and it matters and it's important. And I think in time, the more we start to do that, we can then again start to experiment with, can I now start to express this to another person?
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Some really good help there. I think that, yeah, that's exactly what I would say is one, start with noticing it first before you think about going and expressing it to anybody else, just to separate those out. Yeah, and two, it doesn't need to be a big, massive, explosive thing.
No.
Just journaling is a great way to start.
And also, if you are someone that struggles with anger, if your anger is big and huge, then there are other things that can also help to express that. And I know exercise can be a big one for some people. I mean, I'm never going to go for a run, but running can be really great for anger. And as well, if you feel like you need a more expressive way to get that out, I mean, we are animals ultimately at the end of the day. And so if you feel like you need a more external display of anger than taking up something like boxing or kickboxing, something quite physical or that you can do with your hands, could then be a way to allow yourself to express that in a healthy and safe environment.
Yeah. What I would just add to that is that if you're someone that has really big angry outbursts, is you're probably missing the smaller signals. If you're on if on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're bursting out at 8, 9, 10, you might be missing the signal at 1, 2, 3 that would stop it coming out in that big explosion.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I guess that also then taps into how we perhaps need to increase our awareness about what level are at. It's that typical thing where we feel like sometimes emotions come out of nowhere and we've often missed those earlier signs.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So if you ever felt like anger makes you bad, you're not alone. Suppressing it doesn't make you nicer, it just makes you tired.
Anger isn't the enemy, it's a signal. It tells you where your limits are, where your no lives, and what actually matters to you.
Next time, we're talking about being too different to belong, that feeling of being on the outside looking in, never quite fitting the mold, and what it means to find belonging without having to shrink yourself.
So join us for that, and in the meantime, maybe let yourself be not nice when the situation calls for it. And a question to close. What would change in your life if you treated your anger as a guide and not as a flaw to fix?
That's all from us today. If this episode made you feel a bit less alone, the best way to help us reach more people is to subscribe, rate the podcast, and follow Too Much Apparently on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Those simple clicks help other sensitive humans find us when they need it most. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.